Welcome to The Trader, a Spotify Top 10 Traitors podcast. My name is Matthew. I'm a writer working in unscripted TV development, and I am a 100% faithful fan of the multi-award winning hit TV competition series, The Traitors. The Trader features deep dives into every episode of the show, as well as interviews with contestants. And this season of the podcast has been dedicated to season 2 of The Traitors US. And my co-host for just about every episode is David Bloomberg.
Hello, yes, I am David Bloomberg, as you just said, and I am a 100% traitorous fan. So it works well. You're the faithful, I'm the traitor. And as of the reunion show, people may have thought that I, had finally offed you. So, but as most listeners know, I have been covering reality TV for over 23 years, online, in newspapers, on my own websites, on podcasts, on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, on Twitter. So any place someone asks me to talk about it, or even if they don't ask, I will talk about it.
And I would have responded to your comment about killing me off, but I was sneezing and had muted myself. So, and David can agree to that, just in case regular listeners think he's lying already. I really did sneeze. I'm saying you're almost the host every episode, but actually I too am almost the host every episode, because last time I wasn't here, and you were joined by the fantastic Annabelle from Australia, season 2, on my behalf. So I had a good time listening to you both. It was nice for me to just sit back and listen to the podcast and not have to take notes and do anything with it. And of course, I interviewed Annabelle for the podcast last year, but I'm determined to actually co-host with her at some point. So hopefully Annabelle will be back with us.
Oh, I'm sure she will.
Yeah. Now, this episode of the podcast is a little bit different. We're not analysing a single episode or even the reunion episode. You and Annabelle have done that. Instead, we're doing a couple of things. We're discussing the season overall. I've got some Traitors news to talk about. And most importantly, we're going to answer a whole host of questions and comments from listeners who've emailed and DM'd and tweeted us. Before we get there, I'm going to kick us off with various Traitors news tidbits from around the world, not necessarily related to US season 2. So we're going to have a little TT news segment. First, Savannah Missick, who you may remember featured on a bonus episode recently covering the live Traitors Q&A with Alan Cumming in New York, has written an article for the Women's Sports Exchange site directly related to the show. The article is titled Women's Sports Athletes We'd Love to See on the Traitors. And as the title suggests, it features a rundown of female athletes who Savannah, as a huge Traitors fan, reckons would make fantastic players on a future season of the show. Despite, I'm not exactly an avid sports fan, I still really enjoyed reading the article. So if you are a US listener in particular, I think you'll find it really enjoyable. So you could probably just Google women's sports athletes we'd love to see on the Traitors, or you could follow the link I've left in the episode description. Next, a very niche and bizarre and, quite frankly, amazing story. The Strange Affair of Paul is a new play written by Welsh comedian Callum Jones. The reason I mentioned the show here is because the titular Paul is a reference to Traitors Australia Season 1 player Paul McNeil, who I've interviewed here on the Trader. And the play revolves around the Traitors Australia and, of course, Paul's mysterious and as yet not quite fully explained edit in the show. Callum, the writer, got in touch with me a while ago about the writing of the show, and since then he's announced that it will be debuting at the Camden Fringe 2024 from the 5th to the 7th of August in London, which I absolutely will be going to. And you never know, the podcast may even play a part in the show. You can follow updates on the play at Strange Affair of Paul Play on Instagram, and you can follow the writer and performer Callum Jones at Comedy Writer Cal. A final shout out to Comic Relief here in the UK, which aired live on Friday the 15th of March. This year's show, as you may have seen on social media, followed last year's successful Traitors parody by featuring a new comedy sketch The Traitors, the movie, with various well-known comedians playing contestants from the Traitors UK Series 2, including Catherine Tate as both Evie and Charlie. And if you've seen the UK season, you'll get the joke here. The hilarious Sally Phillips, who I'm obsessed with, as the iconic Diane, and acclaimed British actress Suran Jones as host Claudia Winkleman, and actual contestant Molly as herself. The 8 minute long parody movie trailer was really great fun, lots of in jokes for big fans, and a brilliant closing scene, which you can watch now on YouTube. And of course, it was all for a great cause. This year's comic relief raised, as of this recording, £37 million for charity. So, David, have you seen any of the? Have you seen the comic relief sketch for
No.
the Traitors?
No, this is the first time hearing about it. So,
it's good fun. I'll put a link to it in the episode description as well. I'm sure you will laugh at some of the references to the most recent UK season. So, as I said, I was not on the podcast last time. I listened to you and Annabelle talk about the reunion episode for Traitors US. I mean, do you have any sort of follow-up points on that now that you've recorded? And I'm sure you've had some comments.
yes, yeah, I do. I don't know. Maybe everybody has heard my initial thoughts. Do you want to give your thoughts and then I'll follow up?
Yeah, so I actually just watched it today, and it was very apparent. I know who Andy Cohen is, and I know that he usually hosts the sort of Housewives reunion episodes. And yeah, that the feeling, and I know they did this last season as well, but there's definitely a feeling that the purpose of the reunion show here is not really to talk about like gameplay and the mechanics of the game. The purpose of this reunion show is to try and get people to argue and say nasty things about each other and show shocked or pretend shocked reactions to things. So, I kind of, I still watched it. It was fine. I probably could have not watched it and it wouldn't really be missing much. What stood out to me is, well, at the very beginning, the final four aren't on stage immediately, and they have all the other contestants watching the finale. I don't believe they are actually watching that for the first time, or maybe they're probably watching it for the first time. I think they all know who the winners are.
From what I've heard in interviews, they didn't. Like Sandra did an interview where she said, I heard this and I heard that and I heard the other thing. I heard MJ left and then she came back and then I heard this person won. And then so apparently they, some people did manage to keep secrets and, so I find it hard to believe MJ fully kept her mouth shut, but
yeah,
whatever happened, apparently it at least some of the contestants, if not all of the contestants, did feel that they at least needed to see what happened, even if they might have heard what the outcome was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being skeptical purely based on the reactions. So we see sort of we see everybody's reactions with the actual end of the episode and the screen as well. And I just thought some of them, I didn't, I watched it at home and was like, I have quite a visceral reaction to the show, so I was like gasping and going, "Oh my god, I can't believe that!" But I just thought that the celebrities watching it, they weren't reacting that much. So I thought, oh, they don't look that surprised. Are they just pretending? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a very over the top person. But yeah, other than that, most of the discussion, I guess, came down to what we've already discussed on the podcast. That the season was very much reality players versus game players show, and that's the thing that kept coming up throughout the discussions. It was fine. Like I actually weirdly found myself agreeing with John a couple of times.
Yes,
which I didn't think I would say. There's a point where I think he's talking to MJ near the end, and he says, it's a game. It's just a game. And I thought,
game, end of.
Yeah. So I kind of thought, oh, okay, yeah, John is right, and that I didn't think I would find myself saying that. He's obviously like ridiculously over the top, but And some other thoughts I have about it will probably be covered by some questions
Mm-hmm.
that people have sent in. So I guess we'll get there. Do you have any other reflections on the reunion?
Yeah, I've still been posting TikToks about the finale and reunion. I think as we're recording, I just posted what I expect to be my last. Uh, and most people have generally agreed with me when it comes to MJ's whining, but she has some staunch defenders. The most annoying thing to me are the people who insist that Trishelle and CT were, as MJ said at the reunion, just greedy and they planned the whole thing to get rid of her, and it's against the spirit of the game, which is wrong on literally every level. Uh, we saw on the show how Trishelle almost banished CT. If
Yeah.
if they had some master plan, she wouldn't have done that. And I'm sorry, they are not good enough actors to have gone through that, nor was there a reason to. And it would have been a hell of a risk because if MJ had voted CT, that would have been the end of it. It would have been Trishelle and MJ splitting the money at the end.
Yeah.
And so, no, it wasn't some master plan by the two of them. Maybe CT was thinking about it. We don't know. But it's certainly not the duo doing that together. He said he couldn't risk it by letting her stay around, and Trishelle was the only one he trusted. And there's nothing wrong with what he said. It would have been a huge risk to keep a third person there.
Yeah.
And so there was, they had to get rid of her. How do you think he would have felt if he was like, oh no, let's just, we'll keep going. We'll split it three ways. And then it turns out she's a faithful. I'm sorry, a traitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he has just lost not only his money, but Trishelle's money because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. You end up with a choice of, do we risk leaving with nothing, or do we do something that is going to hurt someone's feelings temporarily, but but we win the game?
Yeah.
This
is what you and I have talked about this before. You know why we have said you don't have to have a traitor at the very end. It's fine to see what happens when the faithfuls have to square off against one another.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was just one vote of that.
Yeah.
Yet, still it was there, and yes, it was interesting. Now if they had, done that. Or rather, the claim that they had done that. Trishelle expanded in interviews and even said if MJ had listened to her, she would have voted CT. Trishelle, before this vote, or maybe before they came out to the fire pit, she was suspect of CT and told MJ that. If MJ had voted CT like Trishelle told her to, the two of them would have split the money.
Yeah.
So... and apparently also the reason Trishelle changed her mind was the look on CT's face, which is funny because that is the main topic of the TikTok I posted today. And then I also was catching up on the interviews and heard that. So it was a good coincidence just, before that. It looks like he's literally in pain.
Mm.
And that was what changed Trishelle's mind about this. This was not some master plan. They were not acting. It would have been a dumb act anyway. So if people want to be on MJ's side, fine, be on MJ's side. But it doesn't make sense, especially from that standpoint.
Yeah.
And then another level that she and her defenders are wrong is saying it's against the spirit of the game because they were all faithfuls and faithfuls shouldn't vote each other out, which is, of course, ridiculous. Faithfuls and traitors are a game construct, not some representation of good and evil. Sandra said it best in the reunion when she noted that at least 18 people had to go for her to win, whether they were faithfuls or traitors. The goal of the game is to win money. That is it, period. But some people just fall so hard for the narrative, both players and viewers. We saw some of the players falling for it, like Peter during the game.
Yeah, yeah.
But some viewers do too. And I've had people commenting like, no, the goal is to get rid of the traitors. No, it's not. The goal is to win the game. it's like saying in Monopoly, the goal is to get Boardwalk and Park Place. No, the goal is to wipe out your opponents, however you can do it. So there's that. And then finally, the accusation that they were greedy, which goes back to similar things said at the Traitors season 1 reunion when people were idiotically suggesting that Suri should have shared the money. No, just no. Stop it. This is the game. The winner or winners get the prize. Get over it. Not to mention that we discussed on both the finale and reunion podcasts, various websites say MJ is worth about $5 million. And she even said in the reunion, it's not about the money, while also at the same time accusing them of being greedy. It's just a load of BS. Anyone who comes on these games to win money, you can't accuse them of being greedy when they win the money. It's the point.
Yeah, and again, it's not necessarily greed to vote out the third person. It's
right.
It's just it's just a
hedging
way
your
of,
bets.
Yeah, it's a way of being more certain that you're going to win something, not because you want to win a bigger share necessarily. You just don't want to walk away with nothing, and that fear drives you to just do what you need to do.
Yeah.
You reminded me of a couple of other thoughts there, actually. One is just simply that watching the reunion show, but also, looking at all the comments on YouTube that the podcast gets, I've become much more aware of how huge and impassioned a fan base there is of the Housewives franchise. Like, yes. I know obviously it's a popular show. It has all these different franchises. I know people that watch it. And I know some of the characters from it, but I've never watched a full episode. And that's like, I watch Big Brother and reality shows. Like, I don't have a problem with reality shows. Like, I watch trash TV. It's fine. Like, I watch garbage. It's sometimes it's okay. I don't have a problem with people watching the show. I didn't realize how much people are behind certain characters like Phaedra or MJ. So I've been very surprised at how willing people are to like say wild things online in defense of them, and that's fine. Like, you like these characters, and that's a whole other discussion. But
it's when people go from being a fan to a stan, where they cannot objectively look at it. If you want to be a fan of someone, be a fan of them, but be a little objective. Don't just say everything they did right or everything they did is right because they are who they are. No, that, I have seen that on like both sides of the Dan argument. Okay. There are some people who came into the Traitors already hating Dan and thinking he was overrated. And they have been gleeful at the way he just blew up his game. There are other people who came in thinking he is a god of a Big Brother player, and they have made excuses for what he did. I came in thinking he is probably the second best Big Brother player there has been in the U.S., but he sucked on the Traitors. And I will say that, it's a different game. It does not impact what I think of him as a former Big Brother player, because it is a very different game. The time he spent in the Traitors mansion, his full game took less time than getting to the first vote in Big Brother. Mm-hmm. So, it's just a very, very different game.
Yeah.
And he did not recognize that. That is his fault for not recognizing it. Mm-hmm. And, but I find that I am in the middle because I see these people, defending him and ignoring reality, and also attacking him and ignoring reality. And that's the way it is with lots of these different people.
Yeah. And as well as sort of defending your favorite player to the death, I would just say, you don't need to come at David or I because we comment on the way they play the game. It doesn't mean we hate these people.
Yes.
Just calm down. That's all I would say. Calm
Yeah,
down.
I literally just said the same thing in the Survivor podcast I recorded last night, which was because I had a lot of things to say about a particular player. And at the end of it, I said, and look, don't think that because I've said these things, that means I hate them. I don't. They seem like a really nice person. But it is our job, our literal job here, to evaluate how they have played.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means criticism. If I hate someone, I will tell you, I mean, hate is a very strong word. If I don't like someone personally, I will tell you I don't like them personally. I don't like the way MJ has been behaving. I will tell you that. It gives me a very negative opinion of her personally. Okay. But anyone else that I criticize, I'm criticizing their gameplay, And so, yes, don't assume, why do you hate this person? It happens all the time where, because they're such staunch defenders, anything you say that's not positive about them means that you hate them.
Yeah, yeah. And my final thought on the reunion and on MJ is, when I was watching it, my overriding feeling was simply, I would be embarrassed to to take it so personally on TV.
Yes.
Like, I probably would be annoyed. Like, if I was in her position, I would be like, man, I can't believe it. I'd got voted out. Like, I'm so annoyed I didn't get that money. Yeah, I'm a bit pissed off. I would just put on a brave face on TV. Like, I would just smile and oh yeah, I'm so annoyed, but hey, it's a game. What can I do? Like, I would be embarrassed to keep going on about it and being like, and act so personally upset. So just to save face, I wouldn't behave like that. But that's just me.
Well, and it was even worse than we saw, because Sandra said in her Entertainment Weekly interview that MJ went on and on for the whole time they taped, which was over 3 hours. Trishelle added in her own interviews that MJ was needling them and making rude personal comments under her breath the entire time. Now, we saw a couple of those, and people didn't react. And that's probably why they didn't react, because she was doing it for 3 hours and people were just like, oh my God, get over it. Now, but there are a couple other annoying aspects of what MJ did, because she was perfectly fine banishing Sandra a few minutes earlier.
Yeah.
But then upset when it happened to her. And banishing Sandra was what set up the situation where she had to rely on being saved by CT and Trishelle. So she helped put herself into that spot. So be mad at yourself. Now, maybe she is. Maybe she's one of these people who redirects her anger. My old boss was like that. She could never do anything wrong, so therefore it must have been someone else who did it. But even aside from that, don't complain about getting voted out incorrectly after you just voted out someone else incorrectly. And Sandra, for her part, said in an interview she gets it because MJ isn't a gamer, but she added in an interview, I had no sympathy because she had done that to me in our episode. It was essentially like 20 minutes prior. She had banished me and I had to take it. I had to deal with it knowing that all along from day one, because MJ was under fire once in the castle, I protected her. I was like, don't worry about it, MJ. You're not going home. I know you're faithful. But she didn't do that for me. So I was a little bit hurt. I didn't feel bad that they banished her in the end. And so, MJ is one of these people. It's okay if I do it to you, but it's not okay if you do it to me. And we've seen those people on all these types of shows before.
Yeah.
She's just even worse than most of those because she has kept going on about it. Now, Trishelle did say in one of her interviews, maybe she's doing this because she wants, like you said, these reunions are usually for people to, snipe at one another. And maybe she thinks she'll get on some other show by it. But I don't know. And this is just opinion. I don't think so. I don't think you make rude personal comments under your breath for a 3-hour show if you just want to get cast somewhere else. Maybe you say the types of things that Phaedra said out loud, and just very shocking. But you say it and then you're done, not you keep up this whole little thing that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. So we can probably head on to some of the questions and comments that we've had from listeners. I'll start us off with this is actually kind of related to the reunion as well, but it's an email from Jeff. And Jeff said, I absolutely don't get this huge groundswell for Peppermint, and the idea that she was so wronged, and we absolutely have to have more of Peppermint over, say, Johnny Bananas in a future season. And you and Annabelle kind of did talk about this in the last episode, actually. Jeff says, someone had to be the first one banished, the same way someone, Bananas, had to be the first one murdered. It's at the start of the game, there's not a lot upon which to base this decision. And says, Peppermint did have this whole if I murdered, she did it because of my outfits drama, which is as good a reason as anything else at that stage of the game. Jeff goes on to say, Bananas is good at various competition shows and was helpful in the first mission. I'm sure that his game-playing interactions would have been a lot more interesting than anything Peppermint would have done. So, yeah, basically he's saying, and that if he was going to pick one to come back on the show or stay longer, actually, it would probably be Johnny Bananas rather than Peppermint, who seems to have lots of support online. I don't know who Johnny Bananas is outside this, so I really have no idea I don't know what show he's from or what he's like. So I guess I don't really have an opinion here other than well, what do you think?
Well, I mean, this gets into a, very complex area that, we could spend days talking about. But the general thing is Johnny Bananas was one of a number of straight white males on the show. Peppermint was the lone black trans woman on the show. You don't often see black trans women on any show.
Yeah.
And so here she is. And there is a long-standing view on reality TV of the way people are othered, and that if one person stands out, that it makes it easier to get rid of them. And this was one reason that CBS in the US changed to a policy of at least 50% BIPOC for all its reality shows, because they would typically have like one black person on a tribe, and oh, lo and behold, that one person happened to be the one targeted. And it's not that people are, nobody is necessarily accusing anyone of being racist or any other ist. It is naturally human to treat someone who's differently.
Yeah.
And so, Trishelle has herself come out and said, I need to look at, and I don't want to put words in her mouth. It's on her Twitter, but she has basically said, I need to go back and look at how I reacted in these situations. And I can't say for sure that wasn't an aspect. Again, I am not quoting directly, so forgive me if I misparaphrase anything, but that is why, and also as far as saying that, they were looking more towards what Johnny would do in the show rather than Peppermint. Peppermint is a huge reality show fan. And Sandra said this in interviews. Peppermint ended a decade-long feud between Sandra and Parvati in just a few minutes there. Okay? Because she knows who all these people are, and she brought them together and everything else. I would have loved to see Peppermint play. I would like to see Peppermint come back and see what she can do in the game. Johnny Bananas, I didn't really know him much. I have seen some episodes of the challenge that he was on. I watched him on House of Villains, where he had entertained me for a while and then did not at the end. And then here he's been acting as bad as a housewife after getting murdered by Dan. He's been on all these podcasts everywhere that will listen to him saying, "Oh, Dan came after me," whining about it as much as MJ has. So, no, I didn't feel I needed to see more Johnny Bananas at this point.
Okay. And just to clarify, Jeff had said other things in his email,
Mm-hmm.
but was just acknowledge he really was just focusing on the idea of who might be more entertaining as a game player, and in his
Right.
opinion, he thought Johnny Bananas would be better at that.
Yeah, and that is we can never know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no way to know, and it is the reason that people are mostly upset about it is deeper than just gameplay and entertainment.
Sure. Yeah. David, do you have a question from?
Sure. I have a question from previous guest co-host Jason. He was on the Traitors Canada podcast with me for one episode. He said, "How does a cast filled with pre-existing relationships affect the effectiveness of the Traitors pet strategy?" And then he said, "I think it's a good idea to buddy with a traitor, but if a traitor already comes in and has 4 friends from before the show, buddying up might be a waste of effort." And this is true. And this is something that, we have talked about the difference in these shows where people know each other ahead of time. But with that said, look at Sandra. She got into the Housewives Alliance.
Yeah.
She said very early on she wanted to get in good with all the housewives. And she did. Her traitor angel, as she called her, was Phaedra. And she said, "I want to be good with Phaedra. I want to be good with Sheree." So even though she was a gamer, she knew to get in good with these other people and make friendships with them. So I do think you can do it if you're good enough. But on the flip side, Trishelle, after it was all over, tweeted a photo of herself and CT with the caption, "You cannot get into this club." And it's true. Nobody could get closer than those two, even after she almost voted him out. Because, as I mentioned earlier, how did she change her mind? Because of the look on his face. Would that have convinced someone who didn't know him for the last 20 years, who couldn't recognize this is a true look of pain? He's not acting here.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the relationships certainly impact things. They certainly affect this game. It makes it somewhat of a different game than the British version, as an example. But it is what it is, because this is what Peacock is going to do in the US. They're not going to change. They're not going to go to, what I wanted to do, which was 2 seasons, one of civilians and one of returning reality players. They're going to do this. And so I think that the players just have to get used to it and hope that they can get into those friendships or find a way to kind of work their way in.
Yeah, I would agree with your response. And we talked about this maybe like 2 episodes ago, that the issue that I have is, as a viewer, I think you're kind of disadvantaged if you don't know the shows that these people come from. So I had no idea that Trishelle and CT had both been on The Real World, and it was, throughout the season, yes, they would say things in their interview, and I figured out, they know each other, okay. But that didn't give me much. So and particularly these at least the English speaking versions become international. So the BBC will show US over here in the UK in the next month or so. So yeah, international viewers aren't going to understand where these people are from. So I feel like surely the most important thing in making a TV show is thinking about the audience. And if the audience don't get these connections, it can feel a bit frustrating to see how the game plays out when you think, they're doing that because of something that happened beyond this game and I didn't know that. So it's a bit annoying. And actually just reminded me of something I was thinking of earlier. At the very end of the reunion episode, we see Alan coming in the castle again, and he's talking about season 3. I'll be back at the castle. And I sort of had this wish. I thought, because the show is really doing so well, it would be fun for me to see not just like if it's going to be a celebrity cast, that's fine. That's the way they're going. Okay. But it would be really cool if it wasn't just Survivor, Big Brother, reality
Right.
competition show. Like it would be just so much fun if they could get like actors and like politicians and like people from all different
They
types of
had Kevin
public
and John, Kevin and they had the athlete in Deontay, and
yeah, it's
so
just a shame they didn't last that long.
yeah, right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I just thought it would be, and on social media in the past couple of
mhm,
weeks, we saw Claudia Winkleman with Courtney Cox doing a
right.
little like funny
Hmm.
10-second bit. And I thought Courtney Cox is probably never going to be on the Traitors,
Right.
but wouldn't it be cool if they got like huge stars to like take part in this? It could be so much fun. So that's something
They
that I want to see.
they would have to improve the breakfasts because following in the footsteps of all the other seasons we've talked about, Sandra said on an interview that the breakfasts were terrible. Like the reason people were always searching for boiled eggs was like they boiled 12 eggs for breakfast. That was it. So if you were late, you didn't get one.
Okay.
And they had like pancakes with no syrup. And
Uh,
they had English muffins, which I guess by you are just called muffins. But they had English muffins, but like no jam to put on it.
oh,
And so she was like, what is this here? Who's in charge of the kitchen? And so, yes, I don't know what it is about the Traitors in particular, but apparently the breakfasts are terrible across all the series.
yeah, sounds like it. And by the way, I think English muffins are probably what we call crumpets.
Close, because I've bought crumpets too.
Okay.
I have, you can go to Trader Joe's here in the US and get crumpets. And crumpets are like on the evolutionary path to English muffins.
Okay.
I prefer them. I have several bags in my freezer, but yes, and along the way, there's also things like Welsh cakes, which are which are sweeter in general, but they seem to be made in a very similar way.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And by the way, listeners, we are not playing the Trader Traitor for this episode.
oh
So,
yes,
but I am just sort of automatically on high alert. So as soon as David says I have a bunch of English muffins in the freezer, my brain is like he's lying. But we're not playing that game.
well, I saw you what looked like taking notes a couple of times, and I'm like, what's he taking notes on? There's no
I
lie
have been
here.
taking notes. I'm just taking notes of things that you make me remind me that I want to
Okay.
talk about later. I have another email from Matt, and Matt says he's got a sort of theoretical couple of questions actually for us to think about. Actually, he's asked like three questions. So his first question is, firstly, what kind of twists that we've seen before in English-speaking versions would you like to see again or more of in future seasons? In this season, we saw the mid-season entry by Kate and the murder in plain sight with, the poison chalice. We've seen, and then he gives us examples of other twists that we've seen in different versions, such as the bribe, where a player was offered money to remove themselves from the game, or a veiled banishment, where players were not told at the final roundtable if the player banished was a traitor or a faithful,
Mhm.
and secret relationships, like in both UK seasons. There are two players who know
Yes.
each other somehow, and none of the other players know it. Are any of these things that you want to see more of, David?
I don't mind. Murder in plain sight is fun,
Yeah.
as we've seen. The bribe, I don't think would work on a reality since we're talking about the US version in particular now, I don't think it would work for them. They, first of all, they're all probably getting appearance fees equal to whatever the bribe would be. So I just don't think it's going to work for them.
Yeah.
The hidden relationships, for the same reason, also wouldn't work for them because
Yeah.
they're all, from, we know all of them already. And
Although it worked with Suri on Big Brother.
well, yes, it did work for Suri on Big Brother, but yes. If they had done this cast, people would have known that was her son, let me tell you. And also, it would be weird to have like,
Someone who's not
20,
famous.
21
Yeah.
famous people and one non. I mean, that even happened on, was it New Zealand, where they had a bunch of, it was either New Zealand or Australia. They were both going on at roughly the same time,
Yeah, yeah.
where they had a bunch of It must have been New Zealand. They had a bunch of well-known people and then a woman who was a hairdresser. And they were all like, she can't possibly just be a hairdresser.
Yeah.
There must be something going on here. And no, she was a hairdresser. It's allowed. It is a valid, job. And so yeah, I mean, I don't mind little things like that. I do mind twists that break the game, like the sacrifice ceremony instead of actually having a banishment, which the producers admitted that was a bad idea. We're not going to do that again. So that's good. Other little twists that like the types that were mentioned there. Yeah, many of them some of them are fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. The bribe would have to be this versions we've seen. It felt like a pitiful amount of money that nobody was ever going to leave for it. I think it would have to be it would have to be like half the prize, take half the prize fund and leave now.
Right.
Might tempt someone to actually do it. The veiled banishment. So this was used in. I don't think this is a spoiler to say this was used in Canada, where towards the end of the game there's a round table and someone is banished, and right before they're about to reveal whether they're a faithful or a traitor, the host stops them and tells them, this time you're not going to reveal your status, and they leave. So the remaining players don't know whether they just banished a traitor or not. I've got mixed feelings about it. Like, I think it's quite exciting, and it makes the end of the game more interesting if the remaining players then really have less of a realistic idea about whether or not there's a traitor left. So that's fun to watch. I think I didn't like it in Canada because I have no way of knowing this for real. I felt like it was done it was a sort of producer decision at the last minute. It felt arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but it felt sort of like forced or manipulated. So I think I would find it annoying if it just randomly happened, and I felt like, oh, they're doing this to interfere with the game in some way because they don't like where it's going. I don't mind it if maybe the viewer knows it's coming, or it's the same every season or something like that. So it's
and the other thing about that is it really forces players to do more of what Trishelle and CT did, which is to whittle it down. Keep going. How can you stop at 3 if you don't know if one person was a traitor? You got to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Matt had another couple of questions. One is, it's kind of connected actually. As a follow-on, are there any new twists or game changes you'd like to see in future seasons? He says in some non-English seasons, they apparently have a dagger, which is obtained like a shield that allows a player's banishment vote to count as 2. Also, apparently in some other international versions, players can play to win a hint as to who the traitors are. So anything that we've not seen that we think is a cool idea to introduce to the game.
Yeah, I don't like the hint. I think that there are enough hints out there by watching their behavior. The hint to me is no, I would not want to see that. The dagger is interesting, but I also feel like in most cases useless. I have seen many seasons of Survivor where someone has gotten an extra vote and has been very excited about it, and almost every time it's useless. I feel like the same is going to be true in the Traitors, because it usually doesn't come down to a single vote. Occasionally it does. So, there could be that once in a while time where it matters, but usually it's not going to mean anything. So I, in general, am not a fan of adding twists just for the sake of adding twists. I know there are people like, oh, it'll get boring otherwise. And, but no, let the game play. I mean, the game plays differently each time. We have seen all these different outcomes. And so let it play and see what happens and go from there. I mean, the only thing I could think of is having something, and this gets complicated, having like traitors missions to do within the regular missions. Like, if the traitors do this, either sabotage it, so therefore people think that there was money lost, but it was actually not, or like I think it was also New Zealand, where, okay, walk into this room, and if you can sink the 8 ball or whatever, then
Yeah.
we'll add $3,000 to the pot.
Yeah.
So, those would be interesting as well.
Yeah. I agree that generally I don't. Maybe I'm naive, but as a big fan of the show, I don't care to see it change dramatically.
Mhm.
I enjoy it just as it is,
Right.
and yeah, the contestants make it what it is. The fact that the contestants change every season is the change. That's
Right.
enough. The behaviors that people have, I don't think you drastically need to change the rules of the game itself. I, if there was going to be a twist, I don't. The idea of like a hint as to who the traitors are, it would have to be something, and maybe this just defeats the purpose of it.
Mhm.
It would have to be something very ambiguous or cryptic that would lead players to falsely accuse one another, and that could be quite interesting. If it was too obvious a clue to figure out, then it's just like, oh right, oh well, it's kind of obvious who the traitor is now.
Right.
That's dull.
But even the other part that you mentioned, they start accusing other people. Could you imagine you've played this great game and then you get banished because someone misunderstood a clue? I mean,
Yeah.
so I think we have to remember also each of these countries' versions has had 2 seasons of the show.
Mhm. Yeah, it's still new.
It's still new. I mean, yes, there are people like us and some of the, listeners to this podcast and other fans who have seen, or, what is it, 2, 4, 6, 7, at least 7, 8 versions of the show. And they're like, well, we need something different. It's like, yes, but that's because you're watching every country's version.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the countries are borrowing from each other. So, we are more specialized, I would say. And so you don't need to change it up for most of the people.
Yeah. I had a final thought for a twist that I feel like it's inevitable that eventually this will happen. And in a way it kind of happened in US
Mhm.
season 2, the way that Kate came back. I
Oh, yeah, that was one I hated, by the way.
Is it because it was a returning player at all, or because she came in like by episode 3 or 4, or both?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
And also an additional yes because it was Kate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I can imagine this happening elsewhere in future, that popular players from the past will
Mhm.
come back. Or what I can envision is at some season in the future, the option for because I've seen this in sort of Big Brother UK so
Mhm.
often, is a murdered player coming back to the game, being resurrected at some point. It wouldn't work with a traitor. Maybe it would actually, bringing back a previous player, but and saying they're back, they've come
Mhm.
back, and this at this time we're not going to tell. They may be a traitor now, or they may be a faithful now. What their status was before doesn't matter. They're back in the game. You're still going to have to figure out whether they're a faithful or a traitor. So I think that's probably going to end up happening at some point.
Yeah, it sort of happened in the first season of UK.
Oh well, yeah, you're right. Yeah, which by
It's
the
just
way,
that nobody got to know them before that point.
yeah, this is. I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens in. Right, do you know what? If you don't want a spoiler for UK season 1, skip forward a minute.
The
and a half or
UK
something.
season 1, the first 5 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically,
In the first episode, 2 players are eliminated within 5 minutes of the show. And what's so funny to me is, I thought it was great because it was so unexpected and so brutal. In the face, I'm in Facebook groups for Traitors fans so often recently. I think there's lots of new US fans discovering UK traitors. I see so many posts of people being like, "I've just started UK series 1, and I will not be watching anymore. I can't believe what they just did in episode 1. This is I'd like been so angry about it. Like, I am not watching this. It's awful." And then all the comments are just people being like, no, just keep watching a few episodes. It's fine. But I just think, what a ridiculous reason to not watch the show anymore. So I just had to mention it.
Yeah, I will say there was a season of Survivor where essentially that happened to 2 players. They went through everything. They went out there. They got to Survivor. And then at the beginning, it wasn't quite the same. The host didn't get rid of them, but the players, I'm going to be criticized because I can't remember the exact details of a Survivor season, but I think it was like a pick 'em, and those two didn't get picked, and so they were gone. That was it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you're bringing them back, right? And it was the worst thing ever. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And they never did that again. They realized that was a really bad idea.
Yeah. It's happened a few times on Big Brother UK as well
Mhm.
that first night the
Yeah.
housemates arrive and they immediately eliminate someone.
Yep. Big Brother US has done the same thing where it's like, okay, play this competition and the loser is gone, or,
Yeah.
the vote is, and that is where, again, this goes back to the Peppermint conversation. Very often it is one of the people who does not fit into a stereotypical
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
It is a person of color, it is an older person, whatever it is, typically that's what happens with a very early boot like that.
Yeah.
On Big Brother, at least.
Yeah. One last thing from Matt, who emailed, is actually just a bit of news. I should have included this in the news segment.
Yeah.
That Matt let me know that the new season of the French Canadian Traitors begins airing on April the 8th with the same host as the English speaking Canadian version, Karine Vanasse. And I posted about this on X earlier because I speak a little French from school and I do my Duolingo, but I am not quite proficient enough to watch an entire French season. If there are subtitles on it, that would be amazing. I feel like there might not be. So if anyone wants to translate an entire season of the show for me down the phone, get in touch and then I'll cover it. But I don't know how that's going to play it.
Yeah. And I would be happy to also, except, I mean, in general, I do not like watching subtitled shows because and I mean, we talk about, the young generation, they always have to be with their phones and they have to have multiple screens going. And that's not the young generation. That's me too. I'm watching a show. I've got another screen. I've got my phone, whatever. And so it requires a lot of concentration to watch subtitles while also watching a show.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting. If I can find a subtitled version, I may give it a shot.
Yeah. Taking notes at the same time would be tough. So
yes,
time consuming.
A lot of pausing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
David, over. That's Matt. Matt done.
Okay.
Over to you for a question.
Yeah. So we have a question from our super fan Michael Collins. And he said there have been lots of complaints elsewhere that the fun in season 2 was hurt by big characters going early. Do you think the boot order in the Traitors can negatively affect your opinion of season quality?
Well, I guess that's one of those questions where we'll never know the answer because we don't get to see the show in a parallel universe where those characters stayed. I mean, inevitably, yeah, some people go early on that you don't expect, and Peppermint was one of the few people that I did know going into this, and I was so excited to see her on the show.
Yes.
And then she got kicked out episode 1, and I was so annoyed. But within a couple of episodes, I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I get the answer is we'll never know, but
right.
I, as a viewer, don't really. Well, when someone's murdered or banished, I'm not really thinking about them anymore. Except, of course, with the exception of Annabelle from Australia season 2, I will never get over that.
Spoiler! You just gave away.
No, I didn't say when she leaves though.
Yes.
For this season, US season 2, I felt like there were plenty of big characters who were in it all the way through. So, Phaedra was, even Trishelle is kind of like a fun character to watch, and Kate is there all the way to the end. So I felt like they were still entertaining people, whether they were great players or not is a different matter. But it was still fun to watch them for me. So I didn't find myself bothered by anyone who'd left early.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard complaints about big characters going early since the dawn of Survivor and US Big Brother. So I don't take them very seriously in general. I mean, yes, some of the bigger players left, but others stayed. You know, like you mentioned, Phaedra made it a long way. Kate did. Peter, John. It's up to, if you had asked me at the beginning of the season if I thought John would be a big character, I would have laughed at you. It's up to production to ensure that whoever is left gets put in onto our TVs in an entertaining way.
Yeah.
And that means casting an overall entertaining group.
Yeah.
And I think they usually do it. So to me, the boot order doesn't negatively affect my opinion of season quality for that reason.
Yeah.
But for gaming reasons, I've said before that some seasons of Survivor, for example, are disliked by a lot of fans because they didn't find it quote unquote entertaining since it was a steamroll. But if people are playing a smart strategic game, that does entertain me. If anything, this season, I wanted to see more of that and hear more from people like Sandra. Like, we had to kind of interpret what she was doing based on a few things that she said. I would have loved to have confessionals with her saying, this is what I am doing. I'm staying close to this person. I'm being close to this person. This is the game I am playing. But I feel like, although they showed some of it, I think especially the US version wants to concentrate on entertainment and not gameplay. And so they don't show that. They focus on, people doing crazy things instead. And a few pieces of that type of strategic talk have made it into like the most recent UK and US seasons. I would like to see more of it. But, the producers are going to do what producers do.
Yeah. And actually, you just reminded me of something else that sort of annoyed me about the reunion episode is when Andy Cohen, I think, starts asking Ekin-Su about, hey, are you and Peter in a secret relationship? Yeah. I just thought, I don't care. Like, I couldn't care less. This is so, like, not why I'm watching this. I actually had another thought about the question itself.
I did want to know about Larsa and Marcus, though. And I still don't think we got that resolved, but
Well, I guess that's different because they were already a couple
right
in the show, but like romances behind the scenes, a bit between random. I'm like, stop trying to make this Love Island or something. It's not. I don't want it. But to the question about the order that people go in, actually, what I would say is the opposite of what maybe some people complain about. I think the fun thing is when big characters go early, because like that's the whole point of the game, is it's
right
unexpected who's going to be murdered, and sometimes that's the exciting thing, to see a big character murdered in episode 2 or 3 and you think, oh my god, I can't believe they're gone now. And actually it would be incredibly boring and predictable if all the quiet people were the ones who left first. Then then it would be like, oh, I kind of see where this is going. So actually the variety and the unpredictability is the fun thing about it. You mentioned Sandra there, and actually the next question I have is about the very thing you just mentioned. So this is kind of it's actually not a question, it's just someone complaining at us on Spotify, but I'm going to read it anyway. So this is from a user called Itavia on Spotify, who says to us, David, I don't understand how you two, that's us, criticize Peter's game because he played really hard, but praise Sandra's game and she's been MIA for practically the entire season. So do we want
They're
to
right. They're right. They don't understand. That is the answer. They don't understand, just like Peter doesn't understand. Playing hard is not the way to win. Staying quiet and under the radar is generally how you do it. And yes, you have to be able to interpret. And that's what we try to do here, is explain this is what Sandra is doing. I think I mentioned there was someone who eventually ended up getting mad at me for other reasons, but had said, I don't understand why people are ascribing all these strategies to Sandra. It's like, because she's doing them.
Mhm.
You know, I'm sorry that I'm sorry that production hasn't shown it, but we can piece together what it was. And then when she had her time in the reunion, and also at her final roundtable, she explained some of it. And then in interviews, she has explained what she was doing the whole game. It is the proper way to play, to the point that some interviewers have been like, oh my God, my mind is blown about how you knew to play it this way. And I just wanted to say, yeah, yeah, me and Matthew have been talking about that for a while. And I'm not saying that by any means that Sandra, got the idea from us. She watched all the seasons. She said that she watched all the English language seasons that were on up to that point, and she figured it out just like we watched them and figured it out. She is a brilliant strategic player, and I would expect that from her. And no, playing hard and out front like Peter did is the way to end your own game. So I would say, yes, that is correct. If that if you think that, and I'm sorry, Spotify listener, but that means you don't understand this game, just like Peter didn't understand this game.
Yeah. And you kind of said it there, but to Atavia's comment that Sandra's been MIA, I would say that is actually down to editing, and we're
Right.
at the mercy of the editors and what they show us. So she wasn't actually MIA; she just wasn't being shown to us very much, and
Right.
that's not her fault.
Yeah, and we had, I've mentioned there was a Survivor winner who actually was on the Traitors Canada. I won't say how she did there because spoilers, but Erica. And in Survivor, I have mentioned this before, in her Survivor season, she was invisible, or as I taught you the phrase, purple. And in like for the first 6 episodes or something, to the point that by the time it came to the finale and she was still there, I was insistent in making my predictions. I was like, okay, there's no way Erica can win because we did not see her at all. So forget about Erica. And she won.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, whose fault is that? Was it Erica's fault? No, she played a winning game. It was production's fault for not showing the winning game that she was playing.
Yeah. David, do you have another question?
I have 3 from our fan Nutmeg House Bear.
Yep.
So the first one is, do you think strategically it is best to start off as a traitor or to be recruited? And if recruited, at which point? And it looks like I might have been wrong. There might be 4 questions here. So let's start with that one.
It's I think you're definitely at a huge advantage if you start as a faithful and establish a lot of trust, become one of the most faithful of the faithful, and everyone thinks you're definitely a faithful and never question you. And as close to the end as possible, get recruited. I think that is the ideal scenario. Like, get all the way to the end with, having picked up no votes, ideally at banishment, you suddenly get recruited. It just seems like the best shot at then getting to the end and no one suspecting you. So.
Yeah, and that's why we said Peter should have accepted the recruitment when it was offered to him. He was in a perfect position to win the game, and he blew it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. Which is also another reason, again, not to do all your traitor hunting, because if you get rid of all the original traitors, you've just got new recruits there, and you have no idea who they could be.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, the second question of the 4, the one that I just realized was not part of the first question, is actually something that we had already discussed about the whole whether or not, they should reveal at the final banishment whether they were a traitor or faithful. So we already answered that one. Next one. While the traitors have significant advantages in the game, how do we get more strategic and incentivized advantages for the faithful to suss them out? I had high hopes when in another English-speaking version, the traitors had one and only one counter mission to add to the pot. So that's the one I was talking about before. Could a traitor's pot be a reward for extra missions or sabotage? And we discussed this a little bit too. I mean, as of this point, I'm still of the opinion that, while the traitors have an advantage, we saw several very smart traders screw up and get caught.
Yeah.
Nobody needed extra help. Nobody needed extra things, to be done, because they screwed up on their own. And so I think for now, I don't know that we need to do these things. I don't mind the idea of a trader's pot, but for now, I don't think we need anything kind of like the mole where, they're purposely sabotaging or anything like that.
Yeah. And is the question asking what can be done to change the balance a little bit more towards the faithful? Is that
I think so. Yeah. It's how do we get more strategic and incentivized advantages for the faithful to suss them out? And I mean, the main advantage is you want to get rid of them at the end. But again, it's at the end. So you really shouldn't necessarily suss them out too early or call them out too early.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of something very pragmatic, it's just as a contestant, watch the show,
Yeah.
watch as many different versions as you
Mhm.
can, and pick up the things that tend to work well. And what I would also say though is, although yeah, the game is weighed in favor of the traitors, and we've talked about that lots. Like
Right.
that's sort of indisputable. However, and I'm trying to sort of carefully avoid spoilers here.
Right.
And I saw a post about this on Facebook the other day, where I actually saw a Facebook post in one of the Traitors fan groups, where someone, without any spoiler alert,
Mhm.
just just posted every winner of every
Oh
season
my.
and pictures of them all, and then just a string of comments of people like, "Why did you do this?" But what it made me think about was
I mean, here's the
it's
thing. If you're in a traders fan group, you have to expect that you're going to get spoiled. I'm sorry. Unless you're in a fan group that's specifically about a particular season and there are rules
yeah.
against spoilers.
Well, that's the thing. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was like a Peacock. It was an American, like
Mm.
US Traitors, and one of the group rules is don't post spoilers without
Yeah.
a big
Okay.
spoiler warning, and this
Okay.
person didn't do that. But what it made me think about was it's not impossible to win as a faithful, and
Right.
actually, if you look at, and again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers. If you look at
Mhm.
it sort of statistically across the different seasons, how many times have faithful won and how many times have traitors won? Actually, it's not wildly different. Like
Right.
it's not as weighed in the favor of the traitors as you might think. So maybe there is something in strength in numbers, like the fact that at least as a faithful, there are more of you than there are of the
Mhm.
traitors. So there's some benefit in knowing just numerically, well, there's probably more faithful around me right now than there are
Right.
traitors. So it can work out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the final question was, David, say 3 nice things about Kate and why you are looking forward to her return on season 3.
Yay! I love this
So
favorite
let's see
question.
here.
Top
Yeah, so
question.
let's see here. 3 nice things about Kate. Um, she was banished at the fire pit.
That's not a
Um,
nice thing about Kate.
yes, it is. Uh, she occasionally did a couple things that didn't highly annoy me in the show this season, and she won't be back for season 3. So that is my third thing. So
What about she's quite funny? Is that not what a good one?
she can be, I
She
suppose,
can
but
make
she's
us laugh.
more annoying than funny. She occasionally made me laugh. I will grant you that. She occasionally made me laugh this season.
There we go. And you're saying she's not going to be back.
No, there's no way she's going to be back.
She might come back in a Doctor Will utterly
Yes,
pointless fly her to Scotland for 5 minutes episode.
right, where she dumps bugs on people.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I can see that. I have. Is that the final question that you have?
from Nutmeg House Bear. Yes.
From it. Okay. I have an email from Declan. And actually, I've told you about this one in advance because we did a little bit of research here. Declan says, love the podcast. I listen to it on TV via YouTube. How much of a disadvantage is it to be in the wrong car for the journey back from the final mission? By wrong car, I mean the car with the least players. And to avoid spoilers, I won't read out, but Declan has sort of listed examples from different seasons
Mm-hmm.
where players end up in a car with fewer players and bad things happen to them. So the question is basically, how
Yeah.
important is the car journey? Um, and I think he was kind of also asking about, you know, how do we decide
Right.
who decides who
Right.
goes in what car? And we kind of have an answer to this.
Yeah. So I had thought ahead of time that I had heard on maybe interviews with you or somewhere else that from whether it was Australia or UK, someone had mentioned the players decide who gets in what car. So I reached out. I don't want to say to who, just in case they don't want their name being used, in case someone thinks it's some big secret in production, but one of the Traitors Canada players. Uh, and they said we got to choose and we could switch at the end of missions too. Some people would plot to switch vehicles at the end of a mission to talk to certain people. So it is a strategic situation. It's not like production is saying, you go here, you go there. People are moving around to figure out where they want to be with, and which is good because it means it's not just convenient that certain people happen to be together. No, they did that on purpose.
Yeah. And it was covered on the
Mm.
podcast. I interviewed Kate from Australia season one. And I don't, Kate talked about it on the podcast, which means I think
Right.
it's okay for me to say.
Yes.
And this is not a spoiler. I'm not going to tell you how Kate did in the game overall, but Kate said, yeah, they on that season, they got to choose who they went with. So there were a particular instance where she desperately asked producers, can I go in the car with this other person?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the production were like, sure, you pick, you do what you want to do. So it was fairly, it wasn't produced, that part. David, do you have another question?
Yes, but this also reminds me of something I was going to mention earlier, but I had forgotten. On the, I think was it the finale show that you and I talked about that CT seemed to listen to whoever had talked to him last?
Yeah, you said that.
And on a interview that Sandra did, she said that before the final banishment, she had wanted to talk to CT again, but production was like, nope, we're done. It's over. And CT had talked to Kate last.
Mm.
And so the reason this discussion prompted it is because it's like it matters who you talk to and where. So if you get a chance to talk to someone in the car, it may be a conversation you wouldn't otherwise be able to have. And so I think it comes back to, I think that reinforces what we said, that yes, CT listened to whoever he heard from last. And it would be interesting if Sandra had gotten a chance to talk to him one last time before that final banishment, would things have changed? But so it does matter. It's a game where it's not Survivor. It's not Big Brother. You are not with them 24/7. You have a certain amount of time to talk to people. So yes, if you're a player and you need to talk to someone, make sure you're in the car with them. Also make sure that you're not in the car with the person you want to talk about. But so, yes, another question, another previous guest co-host. This is Spencer. And he says, you and Matthew have talked a lot about how the competitions are largely inconsequential, but they were a fairly central part of CT's success this season. Near the end of the game, he was barely considered for murder because everyone knew and mentioned several times that he was going to be useful in the challenges. You have correctly pointed out that he was fairly clueless about who the traitors were, but this is also something that kept his target low. And this is again, Spencer continuing. Overall, I agree that his strategy left much to be desired, and his path is unlikely to be repeated very often. But at least in this case, his performance in the competitions was a key element that got him to the end. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that is true in this case. Like, I can't deny that. If the players decided that was something they cared about, then that's what they did, and it was true for them. I guess what maybe you and I have talked about before is that it shouldn't matter. Not that it doesn't, but that it probably shouldn't in a way. So, yeah, if I was playing the game, I don't think I would, especially because the missions are so unrealistic and they generally win every single time, at least some huge amount of money. So if I was playing the game and I was a traitor and I was deciding who to murder, I how good people are at missions would not factor into things for
Hmm.
me at all. I don't think. Uh, and yeah, and I personally don't think is a good enough reason to keep someone in the game. I would be basing my decisions on murder around who was likely to get banished, who had suspicions on them, who was really
Hmm.
clever, who was starting to figure things out. The missions wouldn't mean anything to me. But yeah, in reality, in some versions of the game, the players, this happened in Canada as well. The players have decided they care about the missions, and that will be one of their
Right.
reasons. So I don't think it should be, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, being good at competitions also doesn't guarantee your safety. Johnny Bananas was murdered first,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that there was some thought that CT had to be a traitor and was eliminating all the other macho guys who could do well in competitions early this season. So, it's fine that that was CT's path, but it could have been any of the challenge performers paths also. And so I do think it's strategy. It wouldn't surprise me if they kept him in at the very, very end, because it was like Kate, Sandra, uh, uh, MJ, left, and they were like, oh, we need to have someone who can do okay at this challenge.
Yeah.
So and what's interesting also is that I've seen some people who actually are siding with me about, in saying MJ didn't deserve to win, et cetera, except they're doing it because they're like, CT deserved to win. He performed well in all those, those missions, and MJ didn't do crap. And it's like, well, that's not really the reason. But okay, you know, I don't need to get in an argument with everybody. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, so yeah. Now, what I thought this question was going to be when I first started reading it was about the missions providing information, because CT did flip his vote and get information based on the mission in the church with the ballista
Mhm, yeah.
shot,
Yeah.
the mini ballista shot. And so I thought, as I was initially reading this from Spencer, I thought that's where he was going, which I also think is an interesting question. So, it's, should there be more of those types of challenges that allow it? It doesn't necessarily give hints, but it allows the traders to screw up the way, wasn't it Phaedra who screwed up by moving all the way across?
Yeah.
So nobody forced Phaedra to do that. She did it on her own. And, it gives them the opportunity to screw up.
Yeah. I do like that kind
Mhm.
of mission. And I guess that is also an answer to a question that you asked earlier, where someone had asked, how can we maybe give the
Mhm.
faithfuls a bit more of an advantage? Yeah, so I do like missions where they're a bit more revealing about what people are thinking of one another, and I feel like there maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like there's a lot more of that in Traitors Australia. These sort of missions where you have to target other players and
Mhm.
eliminate them, and you decide who's going to end up with the shield. And that sort of
Yeah.
then reveals how are people thinking, and it just
Mhm.
gives people an extra bit of, in quotation marks, evidence to go on. So yeah, I do like missions like that.
Yeah, and that is something that had been done on Survivor. There was an infamous challenge, the coconut chop, where it would be like trivia or something else, and they would, if they got an answer right, they could, take a chop at someone, and three chops and they're out. And the first time this happened, or at least the most notable time, a tight alliance basically gave away to everyone else where they stood, and that caused people to flip on them because
Yeah.
they were so blatant about it. But then as the years went by, it got to the point where in one season, everyone had just decided they were going to give the win to a certain person, to the point that the host was like, oh, okay, why are we bothering with this challenge anymore? You've already decided why are we doing this? So, that has not made much of an appearance since then, or at least as much, but it is, Was it in UK Survivor? Was there one like that? I can't remember now. I feel like there might have been, but now I'm
Yeah,
blanking a little bit. But it can give things away unless the players are savvy enough to realize, oh, we can't be giving this away.
yeah, yeah. Did Spencer have another question?
No.
No. Okay. Spencer, why didn't you ask us more questions? I have a question from Jessica Marie on Instagram. So Jessica says, question for US season 2 recap podcast. What would have happened if Trishelle voted for CT again at
Mhm.
the revote during the fire ceremony? Is there a Traitors version of going to rocks like on Survivor? And we've talked about this more
Right.
than once on the
Yeah.
podcast. I, I think that our answer is probably the same, and that is simply we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. I think yeah, I think they have to keep arguing until someone changes their mind. And really, MJ should, this was, a perfect opportunity for MJ to again have won the game if she had just switched her vote to CT. But yeah, we don't know what it would be until it happens. We don't know what a tiebreaker is going to be.
Yeah, and I think it must. If it's a complete deadlock and no one
Hmm.
is changing their mind, no matter how many times they revote and discuss it, they probably do end up just having to do a random draw of some
Yeah.
sort. I don't see any other way out of it. Or they tell them, if one of you doesn't change your vote, you're all going to lose.
Right.
Like there will be
Right.
no winner, and force it upon them.
Hmm.
I reckon they would do a sort of random thing somehow.
Yeah, and we know from the UK, from a tie that was earlier, Claudia had said something like, "If you do not break, if there's another tie, we will break it. We will do it randomly." But even then, we didn't know if she meant randomly among the players who were tied or
Yeah.
randomly among everyone else, like drawing rocks on Survivor.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just don't know.
Yeah. And in this case, there only are three of them and they all have one
Right?
vote each. So
Yeah.
over to you.
Okay. So Ali F has two questions. Do you think great game players like your favorite Matthew Boston Rob or Tony, not Tennessee Tony or anything, just Tony, um, are toast in future seasons since they'll go in with targets on their backs unless they change the format? Now you don't know who Boston Rob or Tony are, but I'll take a shot at this. They're big name players. I mean, Boston Rob, I mentioned, is currently on Deal or No Deal Island, and he is showing why he has a reputation. He is controlling that game currently. He literally had someone throw away their game for him in the episode last week. It's like he's the biggest threat. Why are you not taking him out? Why are you sacrificing yourself for him? You are dumb. But uh but yeah, he does that. And Tony has won Survivor twice. So, are they toast if they go into a show like this? Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And this is the same thing we talked about in the episode where I missed the Dr. Will episode, but on the following podcast when I mentioned it and said some of the reaction because he had in interviews criticized some of the other players and they were like, "Oh, you're just too chicken to go in." And it's like, well, if he went in, they would vote him out. Yeah, they would get rid of him first. They would not care if he's a traitor or faithful. They would get rid of him first. And so yeah, he's smart to not go on it. Um, as far as Boston Rob, Tony, any of these other big names, they might. I mean, I thought Sandra would be targeted right away.
I guess it depends who they're surrounded by.
Right. That's part of it. And it's also how they play. Tony is known for playing big. Boston Rob is known for playing big. Sandra is known for playing quiet. And she did again. So are they 100% toast? No. Are they likely toast? Yes.
Yeah. I have actually.
Well, I have a second question
go
from
for it.
Allie. I didn't know if you had any other further thoughts.
I have, and then I have one final question after
Okay. And Allie's second question is mostly for Matthew, since we already know David's opinion.
that.
This was the first season, all of um that the players that sorry, this is the first season among the versions of the show that openly discussed alliances and traitor angels and things like that. How do you feel about including this in other versions as the game evolves? So we did talk a little bit about this, but that was mostly me. So I don't know if you had anything to add.
So, in this case, Sandra talked about keeping Phaedra close to her, and it was she referred to her as a traitor angel.
Mm-hmm.
And Annabelle, on the last episode with you, talked about a traitor's pet.
Mm-hmm.
So is the question asking, will this become a more overt feature of players' gameplay from here on in?
Well, I think it's more, yeah, should it be more included? We were talking about how we didn't see much of, we saw a little bit of Sandra discussing it, but not nearly as much as I think they should show. Do you think they should show more of this?
It completely depends on the cast. Again, it completely depends on the players moving forward. So if there are cast members going forward who watch the show and they figured out that this is a clever way to play, and so they adopt that strategy, I don't. Yeah, I can see sort of production and editing including that. If a player's in their interviews talking about it and saying, I've decided to do this, this is my tech. I don't see why production would actively hide that from us.
Except they did.
Well, they did with Sandra. We it's difficult to say what were they thinking. Right. Why did you do that? Why didn't we see Sandra all that much? Maybe we don't know the reasons for that.
Right.
So I guess it's a question that is impossible to answer, but my gut reaction is it totally depends on the cast of different versions moving forward. Like, are there going to be Traitors super fans taking part more and more?
Yeah, I think that they did it on the US version because although it is a strategic game, they're aiming as much as possible at the housewives crowd.
Yeah.
They're trying to get a good combination of both, I guess, which means not showing a bunch of confessionals of Sandra saying, okay, I'm working with this person. I'm working, they showed the pool ball, the snooker ball, discussion, and they showed a couple other things, but, they weren't going to show, I guess, a bunch of confessionals with Sandra saying, here is exactly what I am doing and why I am doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Back over to you, I think.
No, that was my question from Allie. So you said you had one more question. I have one more question.
I'm thrown. It's not really a question, it's a comment from Kelsey on Instagram. But I have a feeling you may disagree with it, or you might be surprised by what this person says. And I think one of the questions that you asked earlier, one of the listeners feels differently to what I'm about to read. So Kelsey on Instagram says, I watch the challenge religiously. I just wanted to let you know that CT is known as a huge gamer. Every season he's on, he makes it to the end with a flawless social game that I've never seen anybody else pull off. I absolutely loved that he made it to the end here, and it's so interesting to see his gameplay in this type of game versus the challenge. Being seen as clueless was probably his strategy. So Kelsey's team CT and thinks actually he planned it all the way to the end. So, I mean, do you have thoughts on that?
I don't know CT. I've seen CT on maybe one episode or a couple episodes of some show somewhere. So I don't know him. It's hard to say. It's possible that was his thought process. I feel like it wasn't. But that is, there's no evidence one way or another, and therefore I am always hesitant to jump to that conclusion. It's like on Survivor, there's a player who this season, right now, the most recent season, he had spent almost the entire time moping and upset and very emotional, and then people started pointing out that he's an actor, and they're like, he's acting. All of this is for show. He's acting. It's like, he's been yes, he is technically an actor, but he's been in like if you look at his IMDb, it's like nameless part in this movie or manager in some episode of a show or whatever. And so,
Man on street.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, just because his job is actor doesn't mean he's acting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is something Kevin faced in the season.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of people have been a number of vocal people have been jumping to this conclusion, and I'm like, if he is acting, he deserves a damn Emmy, you know, and put him in everything. But from what we saw of CT, I can't make that conclusion. I'm no CT expert by any means.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see him say on the reunion, I was acting that way for this reason, much the same way Sandra said, I was doing it this way for these reasons. I haven't seen any CT interviews. I've seen Trishelle interviews. I've seen Sandra interviews and a few other. I mean, I haven't actively searched out like, you know, oh, let me find the CT interviews. But if someone has something where he said that, then I'm willing to accept it. But I would not go to that conclusion necessarily.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not comparing Kelsey to the people who are saying that this other player on Survivor is an actor. It was just a comparison.
Yeah.
Wait, I just said I'm not comparing her. It's a comparison. It was just a random thing. Yes.
My impression of CT was that my impression was not that he was a master strategist or anything like that. My impression was that he was a nice guy that everyone liked.
Right.
And that served him really well because people got on with him and didn't see him as a threat or a traitor and were happy to keep him around. But I'm happy to, you know, accept that Kelsey knows him better than I do. So
yeah.
And she say, you know, Kelsey seems like a very reasonable person.
Yeah.
So if she's saying, I watched the challenge, I've seen him on different seasons, and actually he always does really well by playing a good social game, then you know, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's good enough evidence for me. So maybe CT didn't have a very overt strategy, but his plan was just to be a friendly person who got on with everybody, and well, if that was, it worked, and he did well. So I guess, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you. And this question is from, let me make sure I pronounce this right, David Bloomberg. How is Ekin-Su doing on Celebrity Big Brother? Because we know she left the Traitors reunion, flew straight over, got on UK Celebrity Big Brother. I saw something on social media. I do not watch UK Celebrity Big Brother, especially. I saw something about a lot of people booing her, but I didn't know what the context was, or even if the people were her like fellow contestants or fans or what.
Okay, so Ekin-Su, Celebrity Big Brother. I am going to spoil things in case anyone doesn't want to know about Celebrity Big Brother UK. So skip ahead a few minutes because I'm going to reveal what's going on. Ekin-Su has just been evicted last night or the night before. So she's out of the game. And I've mentioned this in the podcast before. Big Brother UK and Celebrity Big Brother UK is quite different from US Big Brother. It is almost entirely just a popularity game. There's no strategy. There's no gameplay. You don't have to be particularly clever to win. It's just based on public vote. Every time there's an evict, the housemates nominate two people who they want to be evicted. They just don't want to live with them anymore. Yeah. And the most people who get the most votes go up for the public vote. The public just vote out who they don't like. It's as simple as that. So you end up with a winner who's supposed to be someone that people think is really nice or think is really funny, or it's usually like quite an interesting person. Almost always.
Well, which is why it failed in the US when they did that in US season 1, because they did do what one of our questions were asking. I think it was Michael was asking earlier. They voted out all the big personalities because anyone who was remotely interesting also had people who didn't like them. So they literally left the most, they weren't necessarily very disliked. They just weren't very interesting. You know, they so
yeah. So Ekin-Su is sort of all over social media right now, not just because she was evicted, but because there was a sort of big drama in the house. This year's season of Big Brother, by the Celebrity Big Brother, is only 3 weeks long. I don't think they can convince celebrities to stay in the house much longer than that. And interestingly, what happened was they nominate one another in the diary room in secret, and you don't know who's nominated you. But they did this special nominations where it was face to face, and they were all upset about it, and it's really awkward. You have to in front of them say who you want to leave the house. So one of the other players, interestingly, an American woman called Marisha, who is an actress and a singer who I have seen in at the West End in London. She's playing in Guys and Dolls right now. She's just been nominated for an Olivier Award. She, who seems like a really lovely woman, she nominated Ekin-Su, and her reason, mostly people's reasons are like, oh, you don't do the dishes, you don't clean up enough, you're lazy. You said this thing that annoyed me the other day. I haven't gotten to know you very well yet, so I don't think we're very good friends. But Marisha had this very interesting reason for nominating Ekin-Su. And even though they seemed to be friends and got on really well, she said, I'm nominating you because I think you're really popular. And if you and I end up in the final, you're probably going to beat me. And Ekin-Su had a meltdown about it. She was like, that's the worst reason ever for. And I think probably in US Big Brother, that'd probably be quite a good reason for nominating.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good reason. Yeah.
But in UK, even some of the other players were like, what? You're nominating her because you think she's going to beat you? Like, that's quite an unusual reason for somebody to nominate in the UK. So Ekin-Su had a meltdown about it, told her she would never forgive her. She couldn't speak about it. And Marisha was like, I thought that was a nice reason to nominate you. Like, I'm not I'm telling you you're popular.
Right. But it's a strategic reason instead of a personal reason.
Yeah, but Ekin-Su just was like, no, I thought you were my friend. I can't believe you've done this to me. That's all. I don't believe that reason. Anyway, a day later, 24 hours later or 40 hours later, ends up evicted to lots of boos. And there's there's lots of social media people. She's fake. I hate her. No, she's not. Poor Ekin-Su. So she's sort of at the center of a lot of media attention right now.
So was she voted out and booed because of her reaction?
Yeah, that was a huge tides turn against her because of how she, her reaction to being so upset that someone else would nominate her for this reason. It was so over the top. I don't really care, actually. Like, I have no big response to Ekin-Su. It doesn't really bother me.
Right.
But she also, one of the things that people seem to not really like about her is, so Ekin-Su was on a show on Love Island and won it. I didn't actually know she won it until like today.
Oh.
I just thought she was a random contestant, but she'd won it. And she's sort of obsessed with the idea that she doesn't want people to always talk about Love Island. So anytime anyone in the house mentions it, she's like, oh, I'm sick of talking about Love Island. Stop talking about Love Island. I'm sick of being judged for it. Of course, when she was evicted and had her eviction interview, they then showed her a montage of her personally talking about Love Island a million times. It's just her, like,
I love that.
Like a 60-second clip of her just being like, when I was on Love Island, I did this on Love Island. And she was really embarrassed. And she was like, oh, God, maybe I do talk about it all the time. But
I did see a clip I didn't understand where someone said, and this is when the producers roll out the tape, because this has happened on Survivor and US Big Brother. Like, on Survivor, there was a guy who his name was Dan. There have been a couple of really bad Dans on Survivor. Not all Dans are bad, but there have been a couple. And he had claimed that he didn't say anything. So once an episode aired, he was out on social media being like, that was misleading. I did not say that. Da, 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 da. So at the reunion, the Survivor reunion, the host is like, well, Dan, you've been saying that. So I want to roll the unedited footage of that entire conversation right now. And he rolls it and shows that, yes, in fact, Dan did say those things. There was no editing tricks involved. and it was all exactly as the show portrayed it. And they just absolutely rolled over him with the bus because he was accusing them of having manipulated things and they had the receipts.
Yeah.
And so, yes, so I saw some people comparing it to that. I didn't know what it was about, though. So that sounds like what it was about.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh, my Lord, Ekin-Su.
No, not Ekin-Su. I think we've reached the end of our questions then.
Yes.
In that case, where can we find you online?
Everywhere. Yes, I am all over social media and reality TV podcasting. I am back on weekly on Rob Has a Podcast Network with my Why Blank Lost Survivor podcasts. And so, as I mentioned, I had just recorded one for episode 3 last night, and that is already available either on YouTube under Rob Has a Podcast, RHAP, or on their Rob Has a Website, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find all my various social media accounts through my Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in the URL. Or you could find me at most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. On the video platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at David Bloomberg TV, and Threads is at David Bloomberg TV as well. On the various video sites, I've been posting 3, sometimes 4 videos per day. Right now, I'm, of course, posting clips with my thoughts from US Survivor, shows like Deal or No Deal Island with Boston Rob. You can watch him, Matthew. And as I mentioned, I just finished posting videos from the Traitors finale and reunion, so you should definitely, catch up on those. I'm also doing mini versions of my Why Blank Lost and other clips from Australian Survivor. Indeed, a few days ago, I posted a video of a challenge performance where a guy saved himself in this challenge. And it was really incredible to watch. It was like Mission Impossible type thing. And it caught on. It became my most popular TikTok video, 4 times as many. It has over 4 million views as we're recording, plus another 6 million or so on Instagram. So, I post all these things about strategy and all these things, and no, what I really need to just post about is challenges, apparently. Also speaking of Australian Survivor, the current season is coming to an end Tuesday, and I will be on Silent Podcasts there with Sarah Carradine to discuss the final week and season overall after that's over, coming later this week.
Yeah. And as for the Trader podcast, for today, instead of me asking you to visit the usual coffee page, I would encourage you to visit David's coffee page at ko-fi.com/David Bloomberg. Because David, you've helped me out so much with the season, and you've taken so much time and making all your notes. So I really, really appreciate it. So people shouldn't donate to me at this point. Just donate to David instead, because he does so much work. Thank you. And you can keep up to date with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Trader Podcast, or on X at the Trader Pod. You can also get in touch by email at thetraderpodcast@gmail.com. As for the podcast going forward, I just interviewed this is not a spoiler, one of the traitors from UK season 2, Ash. So my interview with Ash is online now, and I will be interviewing some of the other cast members from the show. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yay.
And then beyond that, there's probably a bit of a break because there are no, apart from French-Canadian traitors, so we'll see how that goes, but there are no other English-speaking versions of traitors on the horizon anytime soon. So at some point, I'm sure we will be back to talk about something to do with the traitors.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And until then, whenever that may be, keep us on your radar.
And stay traitorous.